it's very, very, very rare to meet any kids who know how to pay their taxes, what their W-2 is, what it means, how to change oil in their car, how to open up an investment account, how to do any meal prep. None of these things. They don't know any life skills. They have zero life skills.
A lot of that I don't
Zero.
think is the purpose of education personally, but
Right, which I'm saying I disagree with. I think
yeah, I also
education should
think
be
saying
well-rounded and
faith is
include
the purpose of
everything.
education is also insane. Obviously faith has no purpose in education. Education should be for critical thinking, right? More than anything else. It should be for independence, critical thinking, these kinds of things. And then if we're talking about going on to higher education, study habits is a big one as well. But I do think it's about being well-rounded also. I'm just focusing on academics because that's obvious. That's what a lot of proponents try to put forth is, oh, homeschooling, you have smaller class size, it's going to give you better results. And that just doesn't seem to be empirically true, especially when variables are controlled for. It's the same argument you get from people for private schools. They'll say private schools score so much better. Well, yeah, because people who go to private school are a lot more wealthy and often have or come from two-parent households. But I think public schools also, and we're talking about all the benefits here, socialization is no comparison. The oversight is no comparison. Funding restrictions will leave homeschooling parents with a lot of things that public schools can offer, like school labs, specialized instruction, extracurricular activities. Like I said, the study that showed that homeschool parents find it harder to get into community activities, into sports or structured education opportunities. And then, like you said, we're kind of my point to bring it back to where I was talking about charter schools and here with specialized instruction. Sure, you have more freedom to teach your kid whatever, but most parents aren't going to know whatever, right? You're going to go and try to teach them about cars as a novice, right? When you could take them to a charter school that has, I guess in this hypothetical, like an auto focus, and it would be from people who actually know what they're talking about and not you who just like changed your brakes once. And now you're like, I can teach my kid, and that's it. To me, that's a big problem.
So two things. One, I think the funny thing about this argument to me from the other side is it's always the people aren't qualified to teach, which seems to me to be a self-defeating argument of saying the public school system failed America. And these people are so stupid. Like you said, I'll change my brakes. You made it sound like this is some bumpkin idiot because he went to your public school system that you're preaching for. And now he's
Yes.
an idiot. So it's like,
because he has overconfidence. That has nothing to do with
no. It's
is he
educated? If you went through public school, you should know everything to teach your kid. If you not,
no.
then public school failed. Then public school failed you.
Everything because you went to public school.
Then it failed you.
Everything.
If you can't teach them what you learned, then it failed you.
No.
Then it
and
failed
also,
you. Then it failed you.
Teaching is a skill, and not everyone has the ability to teach. It takes things that a lot of people don't have. It takes a level of intellect that a lot of people are just born without, right? A public school can't raise your intellect past a certain level. There's really good data on that, to some extent, you are biologically confined to a certain intellect level. Your schooling isn't going to change that, right? Your patience, right? Schooling isn't going to teach you to have more patience. It's not going to teach you the way to explain things, right? There's a lot of things that go into teaching that isn't just like rote memorization or like just knowing something. That is an insane thing to say, that just because you went to school and you learned how to divide, you now can teach your kid the entirety of division, especially when you're learning it on a general level, where the purpose would be to go to higher education and get more specialized learning, right? If you're saying it's somebody who just went to grade school, K through 12, they couldn't teach you they could teach you the basics and then nothing else. So if you want to be a spaceman, I don't know, an astronaut, I don't know why I couldn't think of the name of that astronaut, your dad or your mom who's never been an astronaut isn't going to be able to teach you that just because they can tell you what gravity is.
Well, yeah, like I said, it's not as simple. I give the example of taking my son to the mechanics. Obviously, with homeschool, we're not talking about you and your dad in the office for all 12 years. We're talking about being able to travel the world and to go wherever you want to learn from whoever you need to. And that's the freedom that you're allowed to. You can also take college courses. I know people who take
That's not the freedom
courses.
You're allowed to, and you're much less likely to do that at homeschool because there's more.
What do you mean that's not the freedom you're allowed to? No, there is no restrictions.
There's
you can do whatever
so many
you want.
more. Just no, in terms of just life restrictions, the average family isn't going to have enough money to just take their kid on field trips all the time. To just let's do this today and this there, and let's go to France to learn France culture. Public schools actually can do field trips like that because they're publicly.
Well, obviously, I'm not saying take them to. I didn't mean like that.
Like most.
I mean, that would be cool. That would
Most
be
homeschool
cool.
kids probably go their entire educational life without ever doing a science lab, right? When I was an RBT, I
No,
worked.
definitely not.
I don't know if you're saying no, definitely not to agree with me or not, but I worked with a kid whose whole family was homeschooled. I think we talked about this once before. None of them had ever done a science lab, right? And I mean, it was like an extremely religious household, so I don't know to the extent in which they even believed in science, but like none of them had ever done like science experiments, anything like that. I think that that is crucial. I think science is one of the top things we should be pushing, and the in homeschool you have the least ability to do it.
Yeah, I think most of this debate comes down to a difference in what we think education should be for, what it should cover, what the
Yes.
goals are. I'm thinking about, I think you're thinking about academics and colleges and careers, and I'm thinking about life generally as a whole,
No.
and kind of pairing it with raising them as a person rather than just academic achievements. Um, I don't think everybody needs to go into science. I don't think everybody needs to know expert stuff on science. I think you need to know the basics, and then you pretty much never think about it or talk about it ever again in your life if you're going into specific fields. It just has no relevance to your life whatsoever, and that's why we have specialization so that people can study specific things so that I don't have to. I don't want to learn the US tax code. That's why I have H&R Block. That's why I have TurboTax. That's why I have my local CPA. I don't want to learn that stuff, and I shouldn't have to be forced to learn that stuff. Stats, yes, sure, we can debate that. We can look into the studies, how they were conducted. I agree, it's important. But I think if we're going to argue that, okay, there's no benefit, well, then we're saying it's more or less the same. Well, then that's where homeschool still thrives because it still has the diversified skills and flexibility. It has the safety and environment situation, bullying, drugs, peer pressure. You're able to tailor the pace on one-on-one or small groups if you are in like a homeschool co-op, integrating your values and making sure that people aren't telling your kids, this is okay to do and this is okay to do and do this and have sex with them and all
Yeah.
this other stuff. And then I think the downside of the public school obviously is going to be large school size, rigidness of the curriculum. Um, Even though you said it was anecdotal stuff like with me, where it's like, yes, my brain could do the math in my head to where I could just spit out the answer, but as far as asking me to recant the work, couldn't do it. And then all of a sudden failing the class just because I'm not showing my work doesn't seem fair. And it's sort of a one size fits all mentality. And of course, obviously the wealth and money of the family is going to come into play, but that's going to come into play with public schools too. We have inner city schools who have um, fights and guns and cops being beat up by students and horrible learning environments all over the nation in the poorest countries and neighborhoods. So it's not like this is unique to homeschooling. And so that would be my argument, is that if it's all basically the same as far as the testing goes, well, then homeschooling wins by a landslide for all its other benefits.
Yeah, I mean, my argument's the same, but obviously for the other side. The first thing is a lot of the points you make, again, aren't even arguments against public school. Public charter schools exist. There's literally public STEM schools where you go to high school, you have a STEM focus. My school is environmentally focused. We do things outside. We take a science, like, or an environmental science-based approach to everything. We're like working math from like things outside, measuring nature, that kind of stuff. So you can go to these very specialized schools on a public school that actually have instructors that have specialized education to teach you these things from a position of expertise, not just your parent who learned a thing 20 years ago and now wants to tell you about it because he thought it was cool. Also, yeah, like he said, I think that a lot of the arguments he's making for homeschool are arguments against homeschool, freedom of curriculum. I don't think you should be free to teach creation over evolution. I don't think you should be free to teach that trans people aren't real, or that homosexuality is a sin. I don't think that you should be allowed to do that. And you only get that kind of oversight in public schools. In homeschooling, you can get away with teaching all of that. You see them do it. That's why it happens. That's why a lot of people choose to homeschool. And that's why people send their kids to these religious private schools as well. I think that's a big problem. And it kind of breeds this kind of discrimination and oppression that we see down the line. Also, yeah, to the point he made on academics, it seems like everything is about the same. Critical thinking, there's a couple other studies I didn't list. A 94 study showed equal critical thinking. A 2005 study showed equal SAT scores. The 2021 study I listed showed equal academic performance, but a higher likelihood to get a college degree for those at public school. I think academics do matter, right? Because for me, education is about setting you up for success. I don't think it's about faith. I don't think it's about indoctrination. I don't think it's about any of that kind of crazy stuff. It's about setting you up for success as an adult. Critical thinking and a good education, how to understand the reality around you are core things to that. And if you grow up thinking creation is real and evolution is fake, you don't have a good understanding of the world around you. And then last, when he says, if everything's equal, then homeschooling wins because of the other stuff. No, that's not true, right? You get more diversity in public schools. You get more socialization in public schools. You get more extracurricular activities in public schools. Funding allows you to do more things. You can go on regular field trips in public schools. You can have school labs in public schools. You have book fairs in public schools. All of these are things that homeschooling can't even touch. And this is before we get to other core things like special education. Public school is mandated by the state to have a certain quality standard of special education care that does not exist in homeschooling. And in terms of the resources needed for special education, I can tell you firsthand are very costly, right? They're hard to understand. And the average person isn't going to know how to just use a PEX board, right? They're not just going to buy a PEX board and then be able to run PEX. I'm sorry, right? They're not going to be able to get an AAT and be able to run an AAT with their kid. They're not even going to know what it is. They're probably not even going to know that they need it. These are things public schools are required to have. All of these, I think, makes it hands down public school over homeschool.